Welcome. You're listening to Sports Econ 101, the show where we discuss sports topics from a business perspective. I'm your host, Edward Brown. Our normal co-host, Russell Jackman, is off today, but we do have a special guest. And at each commercial break, we're going to ask a sports trivia question. Today's trivia theme is hard, miscellaneous sports questions. All right. And today's guest, who we're going to talk more in after the break, is Jon Kingdon. We've had him on a few times, former Oakland Raiders director of scouting. Is that the best title for you, Jon?
That works.
That works. Okay. What other titles should we give you?
Well, that was my ultimate one. I actually started like as an intern and kind of moved up administrative, and then scouting, and then when Ron Wolf left to go to the Jets, ultimately Green Bay, and then I was the director of scouting.
Okay, and we want to get into that. We only have just a little bit of time on this first segment. When we come back, I do want to know. I want to find out your history. Like first, how did you get into this, and how did you move your way up the ladder?
Sure.
Because I'm sure that'll be very interesting. All right, this actually, I got something really funny here. So I read this little thing. Willie Mays could throw. By the way, he was my favorite baseball player. Willie Mays could throw, hit, catch, and run. His manager, Leo DeRocher, said if Mays could cook, he'd marry him.
Very cool.
Also, when we come back, I want to ask you what the deal going on with the running backs getting paid lower and being recruited less. The contracts don't seem to be as good. For some reason, the running backs are not as in favor as they used to be. And I know there's a lot of good running backs out there. All right, this segment of Sports Econ 101 is sponsored by Pacific Private Money, still providing mortgage investments that are currently yielding over 7%. Secured by real estate, doesn't get any more conservative than that. Check them out at pacificprivatemoney.com. Stay with us. You're listening to Sports Econ 101. Don't touch that dial. We're going to be right back. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. I'm Edward Brown, doing solo hosting today, but we do have Jon Kingdon back in the studio on Zoom, as they say.
Back in the saddle.
Yeah, let's. I want to go. Let's start from the beginning, because I'm trying to remember. I don't remember if you ever really told us like your story. How did you get involved with because eventually you became the director of scouting. But how did it all start?
Well, it's kind of convoluted a little bit, because I got out of college. I really wasn't sure what to do, and I was just kind of looking around. I was thinking about law school, but my brother had dropped out of college, and he was attending bar, and he was going back to college. And he said, "Why don't you just attend bar?" Which was kind of fun. And the only reason I bring it up, the person who owned the restaurant, it was a restaurant in Queens, New York. And the man who owned it was named Steve Rubel. If you remember, he went on to own Studio 54.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
that sounds familiar.
But I wasn't sure. And then there was a graduate program in sports management at the University of Massachusetts. I took that and then eventually got an internship with the Raiders. And it's really funny to look back on it, what the organizations were like back then. There might have been 25 people in the front office. And now literally there are hundreds and hundreds. Sure. And the staff wasn't very big, maybe had 8 coaches and such. And so I just kind of wended my way over to personnel, and they were very happy to have any help.
Let me ask you, what year was that when you started your internship?
78. That was John Madden's last year, was my first year.
Well, it's interesting because they had already beaten the Vikings in the Super Bowl.
76, yeah.
76, yeah. Wow, so you would have thought that there still college, a big sport, a team like that won the Super Bowl, you think that they would have had more personnel.
No, that's just the way most of the teams were. And then, I just started out filing reports, and then Ron came in, and he let me go out and scout local schools. And I used to, as I was filing reports, I was reading the reports, and then eventually, kind of as things opened up, I became an area scout along with administrative, and then became I got very close with Al, became the director, and basically, in many ways, his right-hand man.
Wow. So you start off as an intern filing. They must have seen something in you to be able to say, "Hey, why don't you go out there and see if you can find some talent?"
Well, it was Ron. I worked with Ron, and I like to ask good questions. And I did some reports on film, and very simple. I was I kept waiting for input, and he says, what do you think? Hey, scouting is writing down what you can see. You can see and you can write, so don't worry about it. It was a lot more than that, and
Sure.
you had to actually learn how to write reports. I started to sit down and says, I really don't know what to write. So when I was doing a position, I would go through a position book and read many of the reports that scouts had written on that particular position, and picked up some of the things they liked, and phrasing the way they did it. And I developed my own ways of writing and such, and it just becomes you just develop that skill.
I can only imagine, like, you stuff like, uh, quarterback getting too anxious on a blitz or something like that.
We had a lot, obviously arm strength and
Yeah.
setup quickness and ability to move, ability to see, reacting to things, and athleticism. And I had a checklist that I would go through. And
Mhm.
after a game, I'd kind of look through and see what I had not mentioned and what I had, and then kind of, scouting. It's like peeling an onion. You're starting off and you really can't see it, and as you're seeing things and writing things down, you're peeling it to the point where you can actually see what you want to see. And I would tell the scouts as they were writing, I want to be able to, when I read your report, I want to be able to literally see him
Yeah.
physically, and
Mhm.
also see what you're seeing, his abilities and areas that he's lacking, that kind of thing. The ability to, and there were very good scouts. It really is important to be able to write, and there were some scouts that did not like to write, and
Yeah.
you could see it was really a pain for them to get through it, and that didn't last very long. They couldn't handle it. And you also, it's not the easiest job in the world, in a sense.
Yeah.
Again, if I say, if you don't enjoy doing it, it's a horrible job.
Yeah.
But if you do enjoy it, it's a great job. And I look, you'd get up early and get to a school, and and you'd start like 8 in the morning, sometimes 7:30. Usually there's someone there even earlier than you are, and you develop relationships and friendships, and you'd work and you write your film, write your report, your
Yeah.
notes up, and then you'd have a break and you watch practice. You get in the car and drive maybe an hour or two to your next school, go to the hotel, write your reports. Sometimes you want to get done before you go to bed. I'd be up till midnight, wake up the next day, but each day was unique. It was always
Yeah.
something new, and you're always looking. And so I really enjoyed it. And again, the people we had really enjoyed it. There were a couple that didn't. We had Mickey Marvin, who was a good guy and all, but he was scared to death to recommend anybody
Mm.
until somebody else saw the film. I agree with you. I agree with you. So
Yeah.
he wasn't very. It was really sad, and unfortunately, he passed away of ALS a couple of years
Oh,
ago. But he was
yeah.
a good player, but a terrible scout.
Wow. How often was there the gut feeling of, the intangibles, I remember my dad telling me about this one baseball player, because the guy couldn't run, field, or hit, but he could beat you,
Sure.
type of thing. So, how often does that come in where you have to just, he doesn't have the strong, well, like Montana. Montana didn't have that strong an arm, but there were other things that he could do that to make up for that.
Sure. Tom Brady.
Yeah.
And maybe the best case we had was Rich Gannon.
Yeah.
Rich, in fact, he had sort of that sidearm motion,
Mhm.
but he was a very bright guy, very competitive guy, never really got the shot to be the guy. In fact, when he was in Kansas City, it was Elvis Gerbach was the
Oh,
quarterback,
yeah.
and Elvis got hurt, and Rich came in, and he won like 5 of the next 6 games, and going to the playoffs, and they benched him, and Gerbach came in and lost the playoff game after Rich had that run. And when we brought him in, and it was just a connection with he and Gruden was just unbelievably well. And it was funny. I was at Fresno State, and David Carr was coming out, Derek Carr's brother,
Yeah.
and he had a little bit of a sidearm motion. And Pat Hill was the head coach, and the scouts were there, and he was asking questions. I said, "Well, what about that sidearm motion that David has?" He goes, "What about Gannon's sidearm motion?" I said, "Point taken."
Yeah.
But,
I mean, because
but
even like Mahomes has that, when he needs to.
yeah, oh well, Rich Mahomes is out of this world kind of thing. But
Yeah.
he had that intangible. Mark Wilson didn't have that intangible.
Mm.
Jamarcus, I used to say we had two of the most talented quarterbacks in the history of football and the two most underachieving quarterbacks in the history of football with Jeff George and Jamarcus. But I mean,
Yeah.
Jamarcus set the standard for being maybe the least motivated person in the history. He got that check and he just quit on us. Now,
That's, yeah,
to
that's,
defend
yeah.
us a little bit, first of all, he was very, very talented. Just
Oh,
watching
yeah,
film was great.
sure.
But, Bruce Kebrick, who I, co-author a book with, he knew everyone at LSU. And he talked to everyone from the equipment manager to the trainer, to the head coach, to
Yeah.
everybody, and says, he's a good kid. He's not evil, but
Yeah.
you have to wake him up. You have to walk him to class. You have to get him to practice. And we really tried to make that clear to Al. And in
Yeah.
fact, Lane Kiffin was the coach there. And Lane,
Yeah.
who's become a very good college coach, and he had his issues, but he really knew personnel. And
Mm.
he tried like hell to and Al just wouldn't back down.
And that's the thing is that in a guy like that, if you give him too much money up front, I mean, it's just, where's the, the incentive is because you're competitive and you love to play. But, if you don't have that drive to like, hey, listen, I might not get my next paycheck unless I do well.
Oh, no question. And we weren't a strong team that at that point either.
Yeah.
We didn't have back in the said with the Stablers and the Upshaws
Sure.
and the Hendricks, those guys.
Oh, yeah.
The way New England became, they could take
Yeah.
guys that weren't doing well and come in, and we just weren't a strong team.
Don't forget Howie Long and one of my
course.
favorites who had one of the best arms, Daryl LaMonica. Okay, stay with us. We're going to go to our first trivia question here. Name the two teammates who homered in the same game 75 times. Who were the two teammates who? So you got to think about guys who homered a lot. All right, stay with us. Sports Econ 101. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. I'm Edward Brown along with my special guest, Jon Kingdon. Okay, first trivia question. Name the two teammates who homered in the same game 75 times. Now, who was the obvious choices you were thinking of?
Mays and McCovey.
Okay, they had 68.
Okay,
so I have numbers 1, 2, and 3. So that was number 3. Number 2, go back in time.
Well, I'm thinking. Actually, I'm sorry, I got it. I think Ruth and Garrett.
Okay, that's number 2. Okay, good. That's good. That's number 7. They had 73. So the ones who had 75, Hank Aaron,
and Eddie Matthews.
Eddie Matthews, very good. Okay, that's it. You got it. You got it.
Well, it only took me 3 shots.
That's okay. That's all right. Hey, listen, what do they say? 1 out of 3 will get you in the Hall of Fame. 333.
Very good. Yeah.
Look, did you work with Mark Davis at all?
Very little. At the end, he'd come in before, Al, but Al wasn't doing well. He'd asked me to evaluate a player. He had seen a player who, like 5 years earlier, and he's seen him in the fourth quarter of the fourth game for the Chargers against the 49ers. And he kept bringing him up to his dad, and his dad, wasn't interested. And would I evaluate him? I mean, but I'm talking about a guy in the fourth quarter of the fourth game 5 years later. And we ended up bringing it. We couldn't bring him in that year because it was he ended up on the practice squad that year, and then he got hurt the next year. But Mark never forgot about him, and he says, "Oh, he swears he can run 4.4." And we couldn't bring him in because there was a lockout at that point. And they brought him in. He ran like 4.8, and that was that. But I didn't deal much with him. And then obviously, when he took over, he kind of cleared out the people that were most closely affiliated with his dad, which was one of them was me.
Yeah, yeah. Because I was wondering, I don't look at them the same. They definitely seem like they're different. Al seems to have had a lot more. Obviously, had more experience, but he seems to have a lot more on the ball.
He wasn't. He had his issues, which we won't get into. And I give him credit. I mean, he's made an amazing financial move to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
But his football acumen, isn't very good. And initially, he, accepted that, and he got someone to recommend Reggie McKenzie, who was a disaster.
Yeah.
And then on his own, he brought in Gruden, who I thought had a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And then, but then Gruden hires Mayock, who was terrible in personnel. And then he got someone else, a former Raider person, to bring in the new head coach, and that hasn't worked out well either. So outside of making some money, again, the success of the team hasn't really
Yeah.
been anything to hang your hat on.
Wonder, we were big Raider fans all during I guess probably starting in the early 70s.
Of course.
And then, it was really tough when they moved to LA. It just really was very frustrating for us local fans. And then they came back, and it was sort of like there was still a little bit of a how dare you have gone away, But them totally moving to Las Vegas, it's kind of crazy because just there's Raiders fans all over the world.
Well, again, bringing Gruden in, was like one of the great hires.
Yeah.
And to get rid of John when Al did, to trade him was just insane. And it was just downhill from there.
Yeah, because wasn't he Tampa Bay's coach when they beat the Raiders?
Yeah, which I mean, the irony being is, if we had played any other team but Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl, I have no doubt we would have won.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember there was two. Was he a center? There's some guy had some kind of.
Barrett Robbins was bipolar, and he always concealed it very well. And I guess the pressure of the Super Bowl the next day, it just kind of got to him. And one thing, people who are bipolar, I understand, kind of self-medicate with alcohol, and evidently he went a little overboard on that and whatever. And somehow he ended up in Tijuana, and it was very sad. I don't know how he's doing. I hope he's doing well. I know he's still around somewhere.
Well, we just heard earlier today, they were recording this show on Tuesday, Russ Francis.
Oh my gosh.
70 years old in a plane crash. Because he started off with the Patriots, then he won a Super Bowl with the 49ers, and I think he went back to the Patriots for a year or two. Tough guy.
It's not clear if I guess he was a pilot. I mean, he liked to be flying.
Yeah.
So I guess so it wasn't clear whether he was flying or someone else.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just I don't know. There's some I mean, this kind of stuff happens all the time. But when it's somebody who I didn't know him, right? You just know of him. It's kind of weird hitting close to home. Let me ask you, when you're scouting, do you also scout players that are like on the field during the season? Like, hey, just in case this guy comes up, we should trade for him. I mean, it's not just high school and college and guys who are like on practice squads. I mean, do you ever are looking at players who are actually playing during the season?
Well, there's two departments. There's your pro personnel and your college personnel. I was primarily on college. It didn't happen often. Once in a while, Al would ask me if I happened to be in to watch film on a particular player and to give him my report. But they're two very fairly distinct areas. Gotcha. Now they will look at your reports when they're considering trading for somebody, and he would consult with me or another scout who had seen someone coming out to get a little more background on them coming up. But yeah, you absolutely do that. I mean, your pro guys, their job is really to have a ready list. A ready list at every position. We need a long snapper. We need a strong safety, a free safety. We need special teamer. Whatever comes up. We need someone for anything. But it's up to them to have that ready list on hand.
Yeah, and it's funny how when there was a center that I can't remember which team it was, but this last week where a center got hurt and the backup center comes in and everybody. Like on TV when they're making these comments, it's almost like as though the guy's never played before, and it's like the guy's been playing. Obviously, he's a professional. He's been playing all during the practices. Okay, so now the lights are on, and he's got to come in. But there shouldn't be. I mean, we're not talking about little 5-year-old kids. Why do they make such a big deal of that?
No, well, they have to say something. But I mean, they didn't pull him off the street, like you said. The guy's been in all the meetings. He's been practicing. He played. In preseason and such. I mean, and obviously they were good. They were good enough to make the team.
Exactly.
So no, it's people have been kind of. There's so many commentators now. They're trying to come up with something unique that just really doesn't
fill the airspace. So how often would you get calls from, parents, coaches, whatever, who, because they find out, they know you're a scout. Oh, you got to come see my son, or you got to see my player. Does that happen a lot?
Uh, one time it came up. It was kind of funny. Our team doctor asked me if I could talk to someone. He knew a guy, and his son was playing at USC, and would I be willing to talk to him? So I said, yeah, absolutely, happy to do it. And so the guy called me up, and the guy was a guy I'd seen, but I thought he was like a free agent.
Yeah.
Maybe a seventh rounder if you really want to push it. So we're talking, and I was going to be honest with him. I said, well, look, there are 32 teams. There's a lot of scouts, different opinions. I really don't have him that high, and it's possible, he, the free could be as low as a free. And I said, well, where do you see him going? Oh, well, I think there's no question he's a third rounder, maybe even a second. I said, well, like I said, there's a lot of opinions out there and such, but this is my issues, maybe. And then I finally said, look, the one thing do not do. And what's that? I said, don't have a draft day party.
Oh,
You
yeah.
always hear these stories. Oh, I'm going to go home, and the kid doesn't get, and it's a disaster.
Yeah.
And I said, just save yourself that trouble and be ready for him not to get drafted, and hope that he gets picked high.
Yeah.
Anyway, the bottom line is he was a free agent. He did sign with the Jets, was on the practice squad, was active for a couple of games, but he got cut eventually and never really played much.
So earlier you were mentioning about someone running that you thought he could run a 4.4 and he ran a 4.8. I mean, that's less than half a second. Is it make that much of a difference when you're...
Yeah, that tenth of a second is enormous. I mean, just a tenth of a second is a 4.5 to a 4.6 is a big jump. So yeah, it really, and obviously, and where I'm working, that was really important. Those 40 times. In fact, when Marcus came out, everybody loved Marcus, but he actually ran like in the 4.7s, which was like, and we couldn't, so we put it down. I think it's the only time we ever two times we changed times, because we knew if we didn't do it, we wouldn't get the guy on the field. And Marcus was one of them. So we had him down at a 4.6. But whatever his 40 time was, he ran so much faster than his listed time because he could cut without having to gather.
Yeah,
it's an amazing ability to do that.
Yeah,
and the other one.
Yeah, but you look at someone like Barry Sanders too, who's just because in and out. It's like it's okay that he's not the fastest guy. And man, I don't know how fast he was. I mean, he definitely was fast, right? But was he, Deion Sanders speed? Probably not. Tell you what, hey, let's cut to our second commercial break. No, this one you might know this one. You probably actually I'm gonna put you on the spot, John. I'm gonna say you should know this one. All right. And again, don't say anything till we get back from break, right? But here's the trivia question: who is the first quarterback to... I don't know why people are calling me. Don't they know I don't even have a phone? Okay. Who is the first quarterback to start in 2 Super Bowls with 2 different teams and lose both times?
Oh boy.
All right. That's our trivia question. Who is the first quarterback? I don't even know if there's been another one to start in 2 Super Bowls with 2 different teams and lose both times. All right, stay with us. Sports Econ 101. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. One more time. I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with Jon Kingdon. All right, our second trivia question. Who is the first quarterback to start in 2 Super Bowls with 2 different teams and lose both times? He's actually been a guest on our show a long time ago.
I can only think of guys that have lost multiple times, which was Francis and then Jim Kelly. But of course, they were just with one team.
They were one with team. Okay, you ready?
Please.
Craig Morton. He lost with
Dallas and Denver.
Dallas and Denver. Orange Crush with Denver, and then he lost oh, come on, who kicked the field goal for Baltimore to beat Dallas? Can't remember.
Jim O'Brien. Ken O'Brien. Jim O'Brien.
Yes, O'Brien. There we go. It's funny. I still remember. It's funny. We had Craig Morton on the show one time, and we were asking for some fun stories, and one of them was, I think it was Ben Davidson, not Ted Hendricks, because I don't think Ted Hendricks played. I don't know. It might have been. No. It was Ted Hendricks because Ben Davidson was a little bit before him. So. He's yeah, it's, I guess I'm trying to think of when the Raiders, oh, he must have been playing for Denver at the time because they usually didn't have NFL and NFC and AFC playing back
You talking
then.
about Ted Hendricks?
It must have been Ted Hendricks, yeah.
No,
Anyway,
he was with Green Bay and was it Baltimore? No, well, he wasn't with Denver. Ted Hendricks.
no. But when Craig was with Denver,
Oh, Craig, I'm sorry.
Ted
Yeah,
Hendricks played for the Raiders.
yeah.
And one time, Craig Morton just gets absolutely decimated, out of bounds. With Ted Hendricks just pummeling him. Obviously, nowadays you get multiple flags on something like that. Back then, it wasn't like that, right? And and Craig says he's lying on the ground and he looks up at him and he goes, "Is that all you got?" And Ted Hendricks like, "No way, nobody can come up for that." I love that story. Fun stuff. I mean, I was going to ask you, so how would it be scouting now with the rules, the way they've changed, protecting quarterbacks, illegal hits, that are illegal now, but weren't before, be it, interesting, like last night's game with the, excuse me, with the Giants in Seattle, and Gino gets tackled out of bounds, right? And it's not quite a horse collar, but the defensive guy lands kind of on his legs. And I don't know if he drew a penalty, but it's like stuff like that. They just are really careful now because they just don't want anybody getting hurt. And I can appreciate that. But when you're scouting, how has it changed because of stuff like that?
Well, I think there are two factors that come in. One is like rules are a lot tighter, and so you need people to be more disciplined. And number two, with the amount of money that we talked about that everyone's making, I think it's important. Character has become much more important. And you've seen, particularly with if you're with the Raiders, there's so many distractions and ways to kind of get caught up in things. And I don't know that they prepared like they had the receiver they drafted very high, who was out, and he was, was with his girlfriend. He got drunk, and not drunk, but he certainly drank a lot more than he should have. And he's driving 150 miles an hour at 2 a.m. and ends up running into a car and killing a woman. Yeah. And I mean, little things like that. The little things, excuse me. But I mean, things like that are really much more important to consider. I mean, and how this guy gets off with only 9 years, it's still mind numbing. But I think, character is much more important on so many levels. And you get a guy who's undisciplined on and off the field, he's going to make, stupid hits like that. I was watching, in fact, I saw the Raider game yesterday where, the Charger quarterback's running out of bounds and he's 3 feet out of bounds. And the Raider guy, who was a former Charger guy, just blasts him. He gets kicked out of the game, costs him 15 yards, eventually a touchdown, and they end up losing, by 7 points. So so character is really come to the fore on so many levels.
Yeah, I still remember Jim McMahon getting taken out of the game, as well as it didn't end his career on that play, but it definitely shortened it right away. Charles Martin for Green Bay had he even had a towel. It was like a contract out on him, with his number on it. And McMahon throws the ball, and then like literally you wait 2, 3, 4 seconds, and Charles Martin just picks him up and slams him on his shoulder. And then boom, he's out of the game. And then Charles, he got kicked out, and I think he got suspended for 1 game or something ridiculous. But I mean, something like that is just, and then you think about it, ending a guy's career or coming close to it like that, and you're talking now, lots and lots of money. In the old days, a guy couldn't really live off 1 year's worth of salary, for the rest of his life. Now, someone like Bosa, now he's a decent guy, so I'm not picking on him because of he's done anything wrong. But 1 year's worth of salary, a guy could just retire.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, just going back, when the Steelers were starting to really jump up, I remember Bill Walsh made a great statement where, I remember Kent McClune, who played for the Raiders, and he was working as driver's ed instructor in the off season, like you said, because you needed stuff like, but Bill Walsh, when the money really got high, Bill Walsh said, there's a negative to this because a lot of these players in the off season actually have jobs that lead into post career jobs. And now they're making so much money at nothing like now, but they're making a lot of money. They don't need off season jobs. And now they're done 28, 29 years old. Gee, what am I going to do for the rest of my life now?
That's a very good point.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Yeah. In fact, I think it was it, I guess Dave Casper went into the insurance business.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, obviously he's got great connections. And so I'm sure he's done extremely well in that business.
I think he lives in Walnut Creek, or at least his office is there. But no, obviously he did very well. Steve Sylvester, was a lineman with the Raiders. He got into real estate. It was kind of a funny story. He was telling me, I got to be very good friends with Steve. He was like the ultimate utility offensive lineman. Could play tackle, play guard, center, could long snap, and all of that. And so he got cut. This was '84. And he told Al, he says, look, I'm going into real estate. I'll be willing to come back up to half the season. But after that, I'll have made a commitment to my job and I can't come back. And so late in the year, ironically, it was Mickey Marvin got hurt. Like at about the 14th game of the season, he called up Steve, we got to have you to come back. We got to have you coming back. Geez, Al, I told you I made a commitment, blah, 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 blah. And Al, didn't take it well. So Steve had called me up about it. He says, what do you think I should do? I said, it was '84. I said, Steve, if I thought we were going to go to the Super Bowl, I would say do it. But we're not that good. We had Mark Wilson was the quarterback. Jim had gotten hurt. I said, we're not going to make it to the Super Bowl. And I know Al's going to be disappointed, but, you gave him your word. And so at the end, maybe a month or two after the season, write him a personal letter and explain it again. And I'm sure he'll forgive you for that. He'll understand it. And he did. And he ended up, obviously had a very good. That's one thing about Al, he always read letters. And just as another story, we had a guy, Chuck Pagano, was one of our coaches. And he coached, and I think he was in Baltimore at this point. And we got a new head coach, and Hugh Jackson. And we wanted to bring Chuck back as the offensive coordinator. And I thought it would have been a good hire. He was a good coach. And it came out, and someone said to Pagano, had heard about it, says, we heard that the Raiders want to bring you back. He says, well, I've already served my time there. I can't. And it really was, it was kind of funny, but it was terrible. So I was at the Senior Bowl, and I saw Chuck, and I really liked him. And I went to say, Chuck, that really wasn't very nice. He said, oh, I'm so sorry. Somehow the words came out of my mouth, and I couldn't stop. I says, could you talk to Al for me? I said, well, that won't work. And says, well, what if I call him? I said, he won't take your call. But I said, what you need to do, you need to write him a letter, because he reads all your letters, and tell him, what you want to say. And he sent me a copy of the letter as well. And I don't know how it ended up, sort of towards the end of his life anyway. But if you ever needed to want him to see you, absolutely, like I said, write it. He would read everything.
Wow. Not an email. No, real letter.
Not an email.
So, back to Sylvester, though, I'm just thinking, unless he, how many games did he miss because of that promise? I mean, he can't just bring him back. He's not in shape.
No, well, probably not, but it would have. But it's just another was kind of funny. I don't know if I mentioned was we had a scout, Calvin Branch, no relation to Cliff, but Calvin had played with the Raiders and had been a running back in college. We made him a safety. He was a great teams guy, and everybody liked him. And he had a bad knee injury, and so he became a scout. And the knee got better, but he was pretty much done. But he always stayed in shape, always in great shape. Okay. And we lost two safeties like in 1 week. And Al calls me, says, do you think Calvin would come back and play? I said, I'm sure he would. Do you think he's in shape? I said, well, I know he's always in shape, but let me check with him. And I called up Calvin and I said, Al wants you to come back and play. Is that something you'd be interested in? Well, he's going to make 10 times what he's making as a scout or whatever the number is. And I said, do you still keep it? Oh yeah, how much? And he came back and he played and made some tackles and didn't get hurt. It was,
that's great.
It was, and I was out and a scout came up to me and said, 2 weeks ago, I'm scouting with Calvin. And I happened to be watching your game the other day, and there he is on the field.
That's great.
Well, they
you
got
know,
a kick out of that.
I think about even what Bosa said this year. He held out, right? And so I don't know how many weeks he held out, but when he came back in the first couple of games, he even admitted, he said, "Yeah, I'm not quite in shape yet for now." And obviously it's a very uh, daunting task to be his position, but just a few weeks off, even though I'm sure he tried to keep in shape. Playing shape is a little bit different.
No, they were smart to not just throw him in. I mean, I know he played a little bit the first and worked it up to that point. Whereas a lot of times, you get a player that's held out, a first rounder, and he comes in late, and everyone wants to see him play, and he goes out and he gets hurt.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases, they never quite come back from that.
What do you think of Mr. Irrelevant, Brock Purdy?
The conjunction of him and the guy they gave the 3 first-round picks to get, who I wouldn't call him a bust, and it's unfortunate. What's his name? The guy they took in the first round with the 3 picks from North Dakota State, the Niners. And they just traded him to Dallas.
Gosh, I can't remember now, because it wasn't Garoppolo. It was Trey Lance.
Trey Lance.
Yeah.
And and again, I'm not out of it. I've been out of it for a few years, but to take a kid from a small school like that hasn't played a lot, and you're giving up all these picks, and then he comes in and I think he breaks a finger, and then the next year he breaks his ankle and such, but getting Purdy in the 7th round, it really covers up quite an egregious mistake.
Sure does.
And but again, you talk about he's a 7th rounder. Tom Brady's a 6th rounder.
Yeah.
Rich Gannon was like a 4th rounder, and in fact, he was a 4th rounder they want to make a safety out of. And he said, "Look, I told you I'm not going to be a safety. I won't even show up." And they traded him to Minnesota, and he played a number of years in Kansas City, and eventually came to us. But please.
Tell you what, we're gonna let's go to our last trivia question here. This one's kind of a hard one too. Who was the MVP in Super Bowl 7? And the hint I'll give you, if you can't remember Super Bowl 7, that was Miami's undefeated season. Who was the MVP in the Super Bowl? All right, stay with us. Sports Econ 101 will be right back with some closing comments. Welcome back to Sports Econ 101. Last time for today, I'm Edward Brown, your host, along with my special guest, Jon Kingdon. All right, third trivia question. Who was the MVP in Super Bowl 7, which was Miami's undefeated season?
That was Washington, 14-7.
Yeah, you remember the game?
In fact, the kicker, your Premian.
You try to throw right-handed, there's left-handed. Yeah.
I got a feeling it's Nick Bonacani.
No, Jake Scott.
Jake Scott. I was thinking defense.
Yeah, that one's kind of a tough one. So we didn't get a chance to talk about all the running back questions I wanted to ask you. Go ahead and make some comments.
You talk about why the money isn't there. And part of it is, I think people are I was thinking analytics might play a lot into that, because there's not a lot of running backs to play a long time. But I think, why did Marcus Allen play a long time and Franco Harris play a long time? Because they didn't take the extra hit. Marcus had a great sense of not getting hit, and Franco, he ran out of bounds. Good. He got up and made another long run, whereas Earl Campbell took every hit there was, and he got caught up. And so the longevity is tough to pay for and such. I think that's a real factor. And there's so many good running backs that have come out in later rounds that, fine, you're not working out, and someone else, they seem to be somewhat replaceable, though. But going back in those days, Marcus was unbelievable. How great he was with the Barry Sanders and such. But there's a lot more. I think there's also a lot more passing now than there was then.
Gotcha.
So I think you put all those.
It's not like the 1930s when everything was a run play. All right. Here's our thoughts for the day. So smoking will kill you, bacon will kill you, but smoking bacon will cure it.
Very nice.
And don't worry if Plan A fails. There are 25 more letters in the alphabet. All right.
Nice.
You like that? Okay. Tune in next week to Sports Econ 101. We're going to be discussing sports topics from a business perspective and asking more sports trivia questions. Thanks for listening. On behalf of our team, I'm your host, Edward Brown. We'll see you next week. So long.
Thank you.